Well, good afternoon. I'm Mary Ellen Taft, and thank you so very much for coming today. Really appreciate you taking your time on this beautiful Thursday afternoon to meet one of our candidates, Dr. Christopher Dyer. I will be passing around the mic today, so if you have any questions, please speak into the mic. Thanks so much to Wingspan once again for the phenomenal job they have been doing through all of these interviews. They've just gone above and beyond the call, so thank you so much to Wingspan. Dr. Christopher Dyer is an applied anthropologist and serves as the Dean of Academic Affairs, Chief Academic Officer, and Professor of Anthropology, see I told you I tripped, at Missouri State University, West Plains. He received his Bachelor's of Science in Fisheries Biology and a Bachelor's of Arts in Anthropology from the University of Arizona. His Master of Science is in Marine Biology from the University of Alabama, and a Master of Arts in Anthropology and his PhD in Anthropology from Arizona State University. Dr. Dyer is culturally and linguistically fluent in Spanish, which we have been privy to throughout these interviews and enjoyed very much. He's the author of numerous publications in his field, including books, research reports, journal articles, and monographs. He comes from a family who is rich in an educational history, and he shared that with us, and a passion for education comes from his family, which he shared with us, and I'm just so very pleased to introduce you to Dr. Christopher Dyer.
Thank you all for being here. Again, on a beautiful afternoon. Buenas tardes todos. Es un placer ser en su ciudad tan bonito. It's nice to be in such a beautiful place. And it's a real privilege to be here as well. Mary Ellen said I'm an applied anthropologist. I've been administering for about 10 years in progressive ranks. I found that being an anthropologist and being an administrator are in some ways similar in that you're studying and managing and working with people and working with communities, which is kind of what you do in applied anthropology, where knowledge is used to improve human conditions. I've worked in about 21 different countries around the world on all kinds of research projects with group teams, on federal contract, with various kinds of funding from anywhere from the MacArthur Foundation, the National Science Foundation. My areas of expertise and research have been focused on community modeling and development, natural resource communities, and disasters. And disasters in all different forms, from floods to tornadoes to hurricanes to earthquakes. So that's taken me around the world. Why am I here? Why do I want this job? What's so fascinating about your place? Interesting talking to Lynn this afternoon. It was like I was listening to a sounding board. This is a place that has got incredible potential. It's built a huge base, and it's ready to launch into just a fantastic future. And it's got all the elements of best practices with your workforce development, with your community outreach, adult learning, your strength of programs, and your transition to university. We've got all those elements in place, and it's a great place to be working with people who have a passion for education. So that explains why I'm here and what brought me to this room this afternoon. And I've had all kinds of wonderful discussions, intense intellectual banter and exchange and discourse with people both here and campus, the Albany College campus of Atlanta. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion and questions.
Thank you. First question, ask one and let other people take it. But how do you promote and encourage staff development?
Your question, how do I promote and encourage staff development? Well, it's first of all identifying what staff roles are. If people have various activities that they do, where are the opportunities for them to grow, taking on more responsibilities, or increasing their effectiveness in what they do. And that effectiveness can come from workshops, from conferences, from the introduction of new technologies, new software, from forums where we gather together and discuss our roles and how we can more effectively do that. So I'm very much a proponent of staff development because I found if that's done and that increases communication, we break down silos, we're more efficient, and we find that people will grow in their positions and become leaders and assume responsibilities they didn't have before because they can. So to me, that's ultimately the key for the efficient and effective growth of an institution's staff development.
Other questions?
Good afternoon, Dr. Dyer.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see you again. Trent Morrell, Instructor of Geosciences. With the changing student learning environment, technology, online, hybrid courses, and things of that nature, how do you champion or how do you embrace the use of technology in the classroom, and how do you see that going forward? And do you embrace it, and what are some of the things you see that you could help promote that here? We're pretty proactive in it, but how would you see your role moving that forward here?
Okay, technology is with us. It's not going away. And throughout the United States, people are going to new media in terms of delivering their pedagogy. North Carolina, for example, their system community colleges have predicted that by 2025, almost 90% of the courses will be delivered online. At least have an online option. So that kind of technology intrusion is part of our modern society. It's not going to change, and it allows us to do outreach to communities and places and spaces that we otherwise wouldn't get to. Another thing about it, it's cost effective, and it allows us to engage people who don't have to travel great distances to go to school, or who can't travel great distances. So in terms of a distance tool, that's effective. It also may be more efficient in terms of the way people learn. You know, the whole process of learning, and we're learning more and more about how people learn. Sometimes people learn best working with computer devices, with personal devices. That's part of the new culture. When I was growing up, I want to date myself, but I guess I must. When I took computer science at the University of Arizona, we had punch cards. And we had to program things in punch cards and write, language and stuff. I remember I got an A in it somehow. That was an incredible feat for me. But I've never done that before since once we had this, what we call disruptive innovation, the creation of the personal computer. So that's not going to change people. Students are much more savvy. They're familiar with all of the software, the technology they use in their daily lives. I think it creates opportunities. One of the things we were talking about this morning was flipped classroom. The flipped classroom concept is that we provide online the content, the instructional material, the readings. The students go and look at that, main conceptual ideas, and then they bring that review into the classroom, and working with groups and directly with the instructor, they can focus on the things that are most pertinent and that they don't understand. And so that's much different from going in, hearing a lecture note, and to read chapters 1 through 17, and there's a quiz tomorrow. That's a lot of chapters, but then you go back and you're on your own doing that. Well, this way it's much more proactive, and even the fact that email exists, if you are doing something there, you can query in that process. So I think it creates opportunities. One of the biggest challenges is getting people to do it. If I'm over here in this corner and I use the yellow pad, I'm much more of a late adopter if I don't want to change and I don't feel comfortable with technology. I didn't grow up with it. And I feel like this morning's question, why should I change? Because I know my students are passing through my class, they're taking the course, they've got a decent grade, and they're going on. So why should I use technology? And then you have the people over here, the early adopters, are saying, well, this is great, I want to do this, and I'm excited about this innovation, and they're thinking about all the ways they can teach better. Well, I think you have to know that there are two extremes in that camp. Two different kinds of thinking, and then everything in between as well. So clearly when we introduce new technologies and we're trying to adapt to students' needs as well as the diversity of the population and their locations, we have to give resources to staff, like we started with, to be able to understand the technology, use it, apply it, and feel comfortable with it. And that's a process, and it's not going to lessen, it's just going to intensify. So we are looking at technologies and things we're doing today. Maybe 15 years from now, there's some whole new things we can't even imagine yet. So if for us to ignore it, I think do so at our peril, and we need to come along with the trend. That's my view on it. I've used online. I know anthropology, teaching anthropology online. How do you do that? Well, let me give you an example. When I started out, all my colleagues, oh, you can't do that. It's about people. It's about connections. It's about culture. It's about this kind of interactivity in the classroom. And they couldn't believe that I would actually. You can't bring your shrunken head into class because you're not there. How are you going to see it? Well, actually, they don't listen to it anymore. Sorry. They might be plastic. Anyway, I taught how now teach anthropology online. How do I engage them with people? Well, they do an oral history project where they take an individual. They have a series of questions I give them. They have to physically be in their space, interview them, and then write it up, basically a story about a person's life. And it works very, very effectively. Then there's chat room and all kinds of discourse and exchange. So it can be done, it's going to be done, it's going to continue and be an important part of our educational process.
Just as a follow-up to Trent's question.
Yes, ma'am.
As an urbanite, never put a mic in my hand.
Arts and
I'm the art and
humanities.
humanities dean.
Yes. We have much to do.
I understand you're a violist.
I'm like, you know, the Attack of the Gobbledygook. Have you seen that? You know, the violinists, sopranos who singing and playing violin. I cannot do that. I have trouble enough walking and chewing gum. I can't play viola and sing at the same time. But I do both separate events.
Well, and we'll talk about that later. We'll have that conversation. But my follow-up to Trent's question, and I have one of my own, is can you think of a subject area that is really not amenable to distance technologies, at least the ones we have currently?
Some question. If I was to pick one, I would have to say ceramics.
and I think our 3D
Draw your
instructor
virtual
would
box.
agree.
On your coil, to make sure your hand goes counterclockwise on the screen. Oh, that's a beautiful plot. You got a neat plot. It's much, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty
It's
hands-on.
tactile, it's hands-on. I think clinicals and nursing might be problematic with distance learning. You reach in, you can see your patient. No, that's, yeah. A lot of experiential education doesn't lend itself to distance learning. And I think that's one of the most important educational tools is the experiential, the hands-on, the ergonomic, the kinesthetic. And that has to be and will continue to be part of how we educate. You know, I'm very much a proponent of that kind of stuff. Taking kids on field trips to see pyramids in Mexico, or taking them horseback riding to learn about the history of the horse and its body structure. Those are important things to continue. And not everything lends itself to that. But then there are other things and ways and content that we can deliver and using that technology.
My own question is, there are a number of us in the room who have dealt with various incarnations of the assessment of student learning and have struggled with the various problems surrounding that. And I'd just like to know some of your experience along those lines and what you see as maybe some positives and maybe some challenges that you've seen in your own career.
Yeah. Assessment is something that I've been engaged with in a profoundly complex way, sort of like a Rubik's Cube. I spent 3 years in Washington, D.C. as an assessment evaluation specialist, looking at programs across the country, federal programs, programs for AmeriCorps, programs for USAID internationally, for the Department of Commerce, for the Economic Development Administration. So I had to invent and develop my own rubrics, and in many cases apply them to educational impacts. One case being Panama, where I went on subcontract with Georgetown to look at the Central American Scholarship for Peace programs to folks who had been sent out kind of in opposition to the Soviet bloc, which was trying to influence at that time. And they wanted to know what happened with these people. Did their 2-year training programs have any impact and benefit on their country? So Ultimately, even though we needed 78 in our end, I was able to get 344 people identified, interviewed, and developed rubrics to assess their impact on their country from their education. So that was pretty complex. I'm used to that kind of problem solving. I've worked with Sachs, I've worked with Bell Whelan, I've attended college summer institutes on assessment. I've read many, many books on assessment. I'm familiar with the Higher Learning Commission and North Central, working with that now, integrating those concepts in the process of bringing us up to accreditation with the new guidelines, familiar with AQUIP or the one new standard pathway, no problem here. So the biggest challenge has always been this. This comes, I know why. That assessment, Martians must know about assessment, right? Because if you remember Mars attacks, he does this and then he proceeds to kill Jack Nicholson. Well, assessment is closing the loop, and they don't do that very well. We don't do that very well as institutionally because it's been a long day. You get to the end, and so you've got this outcome, you've measured your rubric, what do you do with it? And often, in many cases, it's like, oh, well, the dean says to let him know what happened, so you pass it up to some black box, and a report is written, the end. That's not what it's about. It's about continuous improvement. It's about finding out what we're trying to do with student learning outcomes. Are we actually doing that, measuring that, and seeing if we can do it better? Now, as I was saying, this morning over in Laramie, it's Laramie, right? It's confusing, but it's Albany County. Okay. Over there, yonder, across the mountains, is that there's this idea that we have to do assessment all the time, everywhere, perfectly, being measuring everything for every class. No, you don't have to do that. What we need to do for ourselves is identify things we want to focus on, and focus on those things for a particular period of time, get the student learning outcomes, and then try to use them to make things better. That doesn't mean that people are, in all those other areas, aren't doing that process of completing the loop and taking those measurements and trying to improve. But it's our focus. So the key is to have a process in place that you can mutually decide on what is your culture of assessment going to be. Common terms, a common maybe basic like Wildcard or someone, a common book to read that everyone is on the same page with, a structure in terms of assessment reporting and accountability, which would include the deans as well as the vice president of academic affairs being informed from the top down and the bottom up of what's going on. Using external experts and resources to refine and reflect on what we're doing with assessment, bringing in these people who've written these things and who do this professionally, bringing in consultants from the Higher Learning Commission or Central who are expert in this kind of thing and are looking reflexively at what other people are doing across the region. These are some of the kind of things that we can do, that we should be doing continuously. And the key is this. Like we talked about with this group over here with the yellow pad, assessment has never been part of what they do. It's like a layered cake. It's an add-on. And why do I have to do that? Well, if we don't do that, we really don't know. We can anecdotally say, yes, we've done this, but we can't really tell people externally. Well, then, as a social scientist, I would say, prove it. How do I know? How do you measure those outcomes? How do you know the students now know how to critically think? How do you know that? And so I would challenge them as well. So what has to happen is assessment has to be internalized. Instead of it being the add-on, it has to be the ingredient. It has to be part of the way we do business all the time and everywhere. And these things have to be understood. If we have general educational outcomes, everyone on this campus should know what they are. All the Board of Trustees members should know what they are. All the students should. All the staff, the administration. I mean, what we're doing back home in Missouri right now is, this comes from a friend of mine who did something similar, Nita Pavane at High Point University in North Carolina, is we're creating T-shirts and emblems and things with the basic, Gen Ed goals on them. Now, the bulleted points people are getting, in a more detailed graphic, but we're putting in flags. We're putting on polo shirts with these things. They're spread out all over campus. People can't get away from it. and their points of discussion, having forums and conversations with community members, with students, with student faculty groups, talk about these things. If this is what we say we're going to plant our flag on, then what does that mean to us, and why are we doing it? We want to be able to answer those questions. So I hope that kind of gives you an overview. But it's a process. It's not just any particular thing or a particular strategy. And what we need to have is our own process that we're comfortable with and people can buy into.
Other questions?
Jenny, good afternoon. Hola, Jenny.
I'm Jenny Hargett, I'm the Dean of Enrollment Services. And my question for you is, could you please tell us about your experience with different advising models? And what have you found that works really well, and what have you found that doesn't work as well? Thank you.
Advising models. Okay. I've been fortunate for the last several years that the student academic and advising services is under my shop, under academic affairs. I think advising is a very, very important activity that is not done very well. And looking at a variety of different models, we're looking for a merge model that integrates career pathways with intrusive advising. And intrusive advising that is pan-institutional, meaning that we'll have a core of advisors who are part of the advisory services who, with the career pathways, have developed the knowledge of all kinds of options available to our students and are assessing their strengths coming in. And then when they go out, then you say, here are all the things in terms of curricular alignment you can do here to get to that career here. And I reflect that, and I believe very strongly in that, so much so that I have a website called U.S. Careers Online, which you can look at. And it's got career videos. Now, my partner and I back in North Carolina, ran out of funding. We want to continue to create those videos because there's no profit to either of us. We're not earning any money off it, but we're engaging industry and other partners to talk about their opportunities. And so that might be something we can engage here with corporate partners. Anyway, intrusive advising, early advising, being able to monitor and assess the students coming in using whatever kind of metric you want, whether it's an ACT, Compass score, whatever. And taking that also, if you want to talk about college readiness to advising, into the high schools, where we're taking high school teachers, bringing them on in-service days onto campus, and integrating them with our curriculum so they understand what we're trying to teach, and they know what they should be trying to deliver. So in fact, we eliminate the dead end situation. So in terms of that, I think continuous intrusive advising is important. So you start with your core, which are those who are your professional advisors who work with the students. And then as you can, you add that layer, which are the faculty in specific areas, and give them similar training. Now, you hope at this level you're going to be working with people who are in a specific area. Let's say they're going into nursing. They're going to have a nursing advisor, or child and family development. They'll have that kind of an advisor. And there's a track of specific courses that they will take and be advised to take along the way. But I think that's my model. There are other models that are I would say, less intrusive, where they're just simply asking the student what their career opportunities are, what their interests are, and then setting up their schedule. Well, after talking to my folks and saying, well, tell me what happens when a student comes in for advising. What do you do? And said, well, we would talk about them a little bit, and then we would look at their schedule and say, you should take this, this, and this. That was kind of, I'm saying in a shorthand. Well, that's not good enough for me. I think they really need to explore and get to know that student as a person, make that personal link, and then have a system set up in terms of monitoring the students, an early alert system that allows you to see if, in fact, a student at risk is starting to fail, and do it very early on. But that means that faculty have to understand what that means. They have to be trained in that and use a diversity of media to contact those students. Don't send them an email and expect you're going to respond. use, if you're going to use Tweet, you're going to use Facebook, have one of the board of trustees send them a tweet. I don't know. It's an idea, right? We could do that. No one could do that. There you go. He's got probably 2,000 friends on Facebook. And anyway, I've got all these friends on Facebook. I don't even know who they are. How did that happen? We just sort of add on. But that's very, very important to keep track of the students through time and get the people who are going to be connecting with them to understand why this is important. You know, because that's how we lose a lot of students. One of the remarks that was made this morning, and I will reiterate it, the most important thing that allows that student to reach completion. Do you know what that is? You heard it. You should know this. A person, connected with a person, engagement, that is correct. What person? Any old person, somebody off the street, a cowboy, a cactus salesman, what? Who? Who do we connect with? Somebody on campus. What? Who is that somebody on campus? Can we identify them? It could be just about anybody, somebody that they feel connection to, somebody who's listened to them, somebody who's heard about their life, somebody who's taken time to be an active listener with them. And often those somebodies are faculty, there are student advisors, there are people in enrollment services, there are people in financial aid office. All of those people are important listeners. And that connection is what often keeps that student here and allows them to be successful. So that's kind of sort of the model that I've developed through time and working with people and thinking, looking at best practices. Does that answer the question?
That does answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have another, I have a question over here. Yeah.
You heard the word reorganization probably many times throughout your day.
Please, 20. Please, but not more than that. Maybe 25.
How would you assist the president and the rest of the campus in designing and implementing a reorganization plan?
Reorganization is a tricky subject because you have to think about a decision-making processes and the ability to make decisions that influence resources. So, and then who makes decisions regarding the curriculum and how is that done? How do we know what's going on in a particular department and what kind of faculty do we need in the future? What new programs exist that we might be missing opportunities on, or corporate partnerships that are out there that require workforce connections. All of these things speak to organization and reorganization. So one of the things I would want to do is look at comparative models of other institutions who have a structure that may be a little bit more formal than what we have. We have a vice president of academic affairs. We have deans. And then what do we have below that? Just faculty, right? Some staff. Staff are very important. Without staff, there's nothing what we call art. But you have to have, you have to be able to organize people in units based upon topical areas that make sense, where they can be making important decisions about priorities, about equipment, about supplies, about resources, including human resources. And that those decisions can then influence decisions that go on up the ladder, and that can be prioritized. So I think part of it is doing a comparative analysis of other programs. And this is something, if I was in fact hired, I would start doing before I got here. You know, in conversations with key people on campus. Talk about the historical ecology of how decisions have been made here, and how resources have been allocated, and how budgets have been constructed. And lay that out and say, this is what we've had. How can we do it better? What organizational components would we need in place to be able to do it better? That's how I would start in a conversation with the president. Now, beyond that, assumptions that I can come up with an organizational structure that fits the ecology and culture of this campus is presumptive, because that requires that I do a lot of active listening and examination and analytics, due diligence, what you've had, what are best practices, and where it is that you want to go collectively. Because if you don't have buy-in, you can create these structures and they will either fail or they will create resentment. Say, oh, this is something that fell out of the sky and I would have been told we have to do this. Well, I didn't agree to that. Nobody asked me about that. My opinion wasn't heard. So we have to create a mechanism also so people can communicate and have their own ideas flow into this conversation and then have options and then discuss those options to see what people think will work best for the collective. That's how I would start. And of course, like you and I discussed, having conversations with key people, both in and off campus, to talk about that and do it very, very soon.
Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Other questions?
Could you tell us a little bit about your experience with community college?
Community college. It goes way back. My experience with community colleges started when I was in high school, when I was the assistant conductor of the Glendale Community College Orchestra as a senior in high school, and was taking it as a course, but then was allowed to do concerts and conduct the orchestra. So I started understanding what the two-year institution was back then. In my own household, since 1972, my father was the chairman of the Fine Arts Division of Scottsdale Community College. So I heard, and a lot of my educational philosophy has been shaped by decades of conversations with two master teachers. One, my father, who was the NEA Educator of the Year one year, my mother, who got letters from Ivy League schools praising her for the preparation of her students in humanities. And these were my mentors. And my mother taught classes in community college. My father helped grow and develop the Fine Arts Division of Scottsdale Community College, which won many awards, one of the top in the country. So it was my household. It was part of my culture. It was part of my upbringing. Thinking about that. I was interested in a lot of different things and went into anthropology because I was fascinated with people and their interaction with their environment. But as time went on, as I assumed leadership roles, I came to realize that the community college was an ideal platform for applying, your training in anthropology. So, along the way, I taught courses I've taught urban sociology, anthropology, marriage and the family, conversational Spanish, physics in community colleges, both here in Mexico and the equivalent there. And so I was a student taking courses in community colleges. I was, an AP music person in a community college. I have a family that's embedded in community colleges. I've taught in community colleges. And then for the last several years, I have been an administrator in a two-year institution, community college. Also, at 5 years at Mount Olive College, I ran and helped generate our adult learning program called the Heritage Program, which was specifically a 2-year Associate of Arts degree, which would then lead on to other kinds of programs in 6 different sites around the state. So that's a kind of brief overview of my life with community colleges. Art. We missed Artsy yesterday. Artsy's not here.
Well, I was on the road.
Road show.
I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the college's master facilities plan for the next several years. But toward the end of that plan is a new fine and performing arts building.
It was mentioned not. Right, when we went through the priorities, it was not right up. It was the first priority, the second priority, and I was waiting for that. I didn't hear it, but I heard it from somebody before then. So yeah, it's down there in the master plan.
It's down there, and it's sort of risen to the heat several times over the years, and then, things being what they are in dealing with resources and community needs, it tends to sort of slide back. But we are hopeful that it will stay in the mix where it is now. And so I'd be interested in knowing anything about your experience with facilities planning or capital campaigns?
Yeah.
And
Sure. And specifically related to the arts and theater, or
that'd be fine.
we can end with that. Well, in terms of, let's say, being an advocate. Yeah, Mount Olive College, we had a situation where we had lost our development officer who I worked with very closely. She was really outstanding, and she got a $5 million ask, got on Cornell's radar, and boom, got sucked up by their business school. And we had a hiatus of 8 months where we were then booking. Well, I stepped in as kind of the interim development person, helping drive a capital campaign, helping stay up and write the recurring grants that we needed done, and being involved in the development process of a new building that was desperately needed. It would be science and it would be business. And we were trying to come up with a formula for funding for this. And we were able, and I was involved in the beginning, including the design of the building, placing in the classrooms, entrances and fire codes and all that kind of stuff, and number of seats in the big lecture hall. However, we didn't have the money, even through the capital campaign, to get there. So we came up with an idea, talking to people in the community, actually, the ex-mayor gave the idea to approach the United States Department of Agriculture. If we would embed an agribusiness center somewhere in this building, USDA could legally give us a low-interest grant to help support and finish up our capital campaign. That's exactly what happened. So I worked with them on that. We were successful. We got the building built, $21 million building. What was really cool at the end, I was able to work to secure $600,000 for funding for scientific equipment to fill the upper floor. And when we were done with all that, it's like I told all my faculty, it's Christmas in July. I have 30 days. Tell me every possible scientific piece of, flux capacitor kind of thing you can imagine, and let's buy it now. Yeah, Fred and I have talked about that a little bit. So, we did it. We spent over $600,000 in 30 days. It was really fun. And we got things, though, that actually were very, very useful. We had a new cell biology professor, a new program in undergraduate research which involved cancer and cancer exploratory research in cells, spectrometry, microanalysis, all different kinds of equipment. And when we were done, we had a lab that I was told by the external evaluator was the best equipped science lab for an undergraduate institution on the East Coast. And I was intimately involved along the way. So I have no shame. I will ask anybody for anything, given the green light. I'm very effective at fundraising, at friend raising, and getting advocates and getting people together, to have a vision created for something. Now, from what I've been able to tell here in Cheyenne, there's a deep and long and profound community history in the arts and theater. Yes? I know this because I'm going to be auditioning for the symphony. And how do I know this? Because there is a symphony. This is important. You can't go audition on the street corner. Maybe somebody will come join you. No, it's there. It's got a long history and tradition. You have the chamber singers. Very outstanding group that you have auditioned. You have the community choir. There are lots of events that you are engaged in that are cultural and theater events that happen throughout the year. So there's that consciousness, that underlying cultural patina, which I think would support this. Now, here's the trick. We have other priorities. I think there are two at least that are front and center, in front of the line, instead of the performing arts. Did I get that right?
Building.
Not center, building. Okay, I heard that center is a building. It's a building. Okay, so
We're going for the instructional issue.
instructional. So I would say that given those other priorities and the fact that any building on this campus, from what I understand, has to be collectively viewed, understood, and receive certain kinds of approvals. Even if it's built and we could raise the money for it, then there's the support issue. There's the maintenance, there's infrastructure. There is, personnel to take care of the building, all of that. And those all impact the bottom line and our state-granted budget. So that would be a conversation. Personally, I support and am a strong advocate for the theater, the arts, and humanities. I grew up in a household, I've done theater, I've done opera, I've played in violas, I've had string quartets. I've written plays, I've performed in plays, you know, I've done all this kind of crazy stuff. This is kind of a part of my heritage, and it keeps me balanced from the sciencey, social science kind of world. So I would definitely support an initiative of that, but it would have to be framed in the priorities of our institution and that sequence.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'm going to ask a question. Could you take a minute and tell us about maybe one or two top initiatives that you've been directly responsible for in your current organization and the impact they've had on the organization?
Okay, top initiatives.
Top new initiatives, I should say.
New top initiatives. In the state of Missouri, we have found, and through looking at demographics and looking at the counties that we serve, that the populations are predicted through 2050 into the future to flatline, to be plateauing, particularly the graduating youth. In other words, there are fewer high school students out there. At the same time, with the campus being formed in 1963, you know, at the edict of the legislature, there were no other options at that point. It was a standalone, and it served this whole region of the Ozarks. Now there are at least half a dozen or more institutions that have popped up in the region. Plus, there are a lot of others that are providing online services, you know, throughout the area as they get the, you know, the proper cable and stuff that's put in. So, given that scenario, the question that I brought, which was also modeled in North Carolina, are there folks out there, are there cohorts that we are not serving? Knowing that our seniors in high school are plateauing, who are we not serving? This came to me in part by hearing and talking to students who are, I would classify them as adult non-traditional students coming in for reinstatement. And then I asked them, well, what happened? Why did you have this blow up and up W's and an F and you know, couldn't continue when you were doing well with A's and B's and C's, and now you're, you know, somewhat. And it was many times social factors, economic intrusions, poverty, an abusive spouse, the loss of household, illness of a relative, a lot of things that go along with poverty. So what we put in place was a program similar to what I had in North Carolina, which was called a Heritage Program, which focused on, was directed towards the non-traditional adult learner. And when I did a survey, 8 months in design surveys, sent them out everywhere, and collected the results, a good 70% of the results that we got back indicated they would be interested in an adult learning program that would help folks who couldn't go to school because they had full-time jobs and full-time families. So the day option was not good for them, and many of them were, you know, not necessarily online savvy in that area. So the GOLD program was formed, Great Opportunities for Adult Learners. The GOLD program was specifically designed using the model from North Carolina, so you can go to school 1 night a week. In approximately 2 years, you have an associate's degree. The program revolved around hybrid classes, online classes, which they got subsequently as they took computer courses and developed their computer literacy, and CD courses, which had an accelerated format. You work 4 hours a night, and then you have 15 hours of work before that next class. And then sometimes they were sequenced, sometimes they overlapped a little bit, but in 25 weeks you've got a degree. So that program was launched. It's been very, very successful. We've gotten testimonials from students. They just break down. They're so emotional because they never thought they could ever go to college, and now they're doing it. In fact, I was in on the first cohort and teaching the student success component because I really wanted to get to know these students, where they came from, what they were about, and hear their stories. And it was phenomenal. And that's something that I've introduced, and that's expanded, and that's growing there. So that's one program. Another program that's new, it's related to federal policy. In the healthcare area, allied health, if you have a person that comes to your hospital and they have a particular condition, you provide them with a regime. They go away, come back 30 days later, and they're worse. The question is, who's responsible? Are they responsible ethically because they didn't follow the regime? Or are you responsible because you're the healthcare provider. Well, the federal government is saying you're responsible, healthcare provider. This story was told to me, I didn't make this up, the director of the Ozark Medical Center, which serves a 12-county region, invited me for lunch with his information director and told me this story. And said, I'm Christopher, I know you had this program in North Carolina, Fitness by Design. You were able to get tons of money for it. It's ongoing, it's successful. Can you help us? So what we put in place, and just before I came here, we finished, we're writing multiple grants, but I finished the grant for the CDC, the big $1.4 million grant, for a fit community program, which will cover a population of approximately 150,000 people, 12 counties, all the clinics in those regions, all the county health departments, the Missouri State University West Plains Division of Physical Education has fitness buddies, and the Ozark Medical Center. And it also will integrate community activities such as things we have called walkathons, which engage the YMCA, the elementary school, the high school. It has a nutritional component, a wellness component, fitness, and then a social fitness component in terms of growing and developing community gardens. People are making things growing. Well, that's another initiative which we started. And it's based on a project that I did similarly in North Carolina, which is still going gangbusters. It's wonderfully successful. Now, how was I able to do that? Well, that integrated students, faculty, the community, healthcare providers. It's a perfect community applied anthropology design, but it's all about education. Educating people about how to eat food, how to exercise, and giving students hands-on ergonomic physical exercise experience working with clients and helping them improve their lives. That goes on their resume. Across this country, we have rural health clinics opening everywhere. These people are getting jobs. These students are getting jobs. And we've institutionalized it now there in North Carolina because it is now part of the curriculum. And instead of the monies coming out of the grant to pay for them, they're getting tuition credit for this. And to graduate, they have to do an internship as a fitness buddy with one of these clients. The results, just preliminary results from the first year, and the second and third year results are also phenomenal. 92 clients, 1,260 pounds lost, 946 inches off the waistline. That's 90 inches per client. And the drop in almost 15 points in terms of hypertension, 40% increase in eating vegetables and healthy products, a significant decline in fast food consumption, and one impact that I didn't anticipate, a lot of these folks are getting off depression meds because their self-esteem has been elevated and they don't need them because they feel good about themselves, they're getting oxygen, they have a new self-image, a new body image, and they're just feeling great. And boiled down to one thing that one of the folks said to me, and these are people who are poor, who are indigenous, who don't have access to these things, and we've created this for them, and it costs them nothing. KB Reynolds Foundation, Blue Cross Blue Shield, paying for this, and the college. And she says to me, Dr. Dyer, when do I graduate from this program? I said, girl, you never graduate. Well, I'm going to college and graduate from something. No, you don't graduate because it's a life change. It's a permanent change in the way you live, in the way you view yourself, in the way you think about your community, your family, yourself, the way you consume food, the way you run your life. And it's been doing for you. And so that's another thing where it has economic benefits, it has educational benefits, it helps students, faculty engagement, healthcare providers, and the clients themselves. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any last questions for Dr. Dyer? Anyone? Going once, going twice? Well, thank you so very much for coming this afternoon and for listening, and thank you for indulging us one last time, Dr. Dyer, and answering our many questions.
Could I say one thing?
Yes, please.
Well, you know me, I know I can't say
Yes.
that.
My apologies for not asking him.
Curse and my mother says you got ideas and really bad for it. You should go into education. Don't be a physicist, you go to teach people. Thank you so much for the opportunity of being here and for talking to you and sharing my thoughts and ideas and being able to see your vision and the incredible potential of this place. I really, really appreciate it. It's a real honor and privilege to have been here, and I learned hopefully as much as I've been able to impart. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.